The next moment, he walked up to her, to Mrs. Margaret, and he said to her that everything is going to be fine. John has just broken his leg. She looked angrily at him. What are you saying? Then the boy again repeated, John was hit by a car and he has broken his leg only, otherwise he'd be okay. So she just stared at the boy as if he'd gone crazy and then ordered him to go back and sit on his seat. And the class started. About an hour later, later in the afternoon, the principal came and spoke quietly to the teacher. And she immediately left the room, like in a great panic. Jaldi se wo nikal gayi wahan se. And the next day when she came back to school, she seemed normal, but she kept on looking at James again and again. उसकी तरफ पूरा उसका ध्यान जाए जा रहा था. And then after class, she asked him to stay back. And then she said that what you said yesterday, that John has broken his leg, that is what happened. How did you know? The boy didn't have any answer. He said that it just somehow felt, and I just told you that. And then James began to feel that he was responsible for the accident, that मैंने बोला था इसलिए accident हो गया. But the teacher calmed him down that you are not at fault. He was not responsible for creating that accident. And she said that sometimes people know things before they happen. And it was a special gift. And that he was one of God's messengers so that he could help people. But she also told him to be careful whom he shared the specialness with. Now, this little boy was James von Prague. And that was the first time he became acquainted with his psychic abilities that he possessed them. Now, who is James von Prague? He is an American author, producer, and television personality. And he has been blessed with this extraordinary gift that he can communicate with spirits from the other world, from the other side, even of animals. And like this special ability helps him to gap the bridge between this world and that world. So he's called a spiritual medium. And he has shared his experiences with the world through his books. Now, this story is about his own journey, how he got acquainted with his own spiritual side, his psychic abilities, and how they develop over the years. Because all of us have these abilities, but we are not able to access them. So इनके थोड़े से और prominent थे. He was able to connect to them later on in life and utilize them to help other people. Okay, so as we saw, James was just an ordinary child living an ordinary life with no thought of being a medium of any kind. But he was a very spiritual child. He was very much connected to the spiritual aspect of life, and he had this yen to see God. He wanted to know about the existence of God from a very young age, because they were Catholics and they used to go to church and regular Bible readings hoti thi, sari stories sunate the. But he could not connect to those stories at all. He somehow felt that they were not realistic. And he used to keep asking questions like, how do we know God really exists? Has anyone ever seen God? And he would have this thought constantly in his mind that if there is a God, please show me proof of your existence. And when he was about 8 years old, he had a very strange experience. Like he woke up early in the morning and he was just lying in bed, and suddenly he felt a very strong gust of wind. But the windows were closed. There was nowhere from where the wind could have come. So he was very surprised. And then suddenly he looked up at the ceiling and he saw a large hand coming down towards him. It was like a very beautiful, shimmering sort of hand. And he was totally mesmerized with it. He wasn't feeling afraid at all. Of course, he couldn't understand what was happening. But suddenly he seemed to be filled with an overwhelming sense of peace and love and joy. And there was a deep knowing in his heart, this is a vision of God. it was nothing like what he had been told by the Bible stories, that there would be a booming voice to answer your questions. It was nothing like that. It was just something that he was experiencing. And even his young heart could understand that this is something divine that he was feeling. So that was one of the first clairvoyant experiences that he had. Of course, at that moment, he did not understand it much, know much about it. But that experience was enough to convince him that God did exist. And that experience helped him to open his mind to even more questions about life and death. So he loved to experiment with paranormal games like the Ouija board, the seances, and was interest तो था इन चीजों में, तो he used to experiment with his friends. So one evening, along with his friend Scott, he decided to set up a seance setting in Scott's room. And they have these seances where people sit together and they call the spirits, that sort of thing. They had heard about it, so they wanted to experience on their own. So उसके कमरे में बैठ गए, खिड़की दरवाजे बंद कर दिए, लाइट्स बंद ऑफ कर दी, एंड एक कैंडल जला के दोनों बैठ गए. अब कैंडल की तो लाइट फ्लिकर करती है, कुछ throwing strange shadows on the wall, and that was a little scary. And that was the point of the game, that who will get scared first. But they continued to sit there for half an hour. And then Scott suggested maybe we should talk to somebody, call them, kuch ho to raha hi nahi hai. So a friend of theirs, Janice, had passed away the previous year. So Scott suggested, let's call her name. So they started chanting Janice, but still nothing happened. So then James said, Janice, if you are in the room, give us a sign with the candle flame. And much to their horror, the candle started flickering. And in a very odd way that time. It first leaned towards one side and stayed. A candle doesn't do that, but it stayed. And then it went to the other side and again became still. And then began flickering wildly, back and forth, back and forth. Now, the two brave hearts, by now this time, they were thoroughly scared and were staring in a petrified way at the candle. And suddenly the candle went out and the whole room was in darkness. Now, that was too much for them. And then both of them ran screaming from the room to their parents, to the boys' parents outside. And the irony was that what had started as a trick, a gag between two kids, became a sort of induction to what was to become James' career later on. But of course, उस टाइम तो समझ नहीं आती ना कि यही मेरे को करना होगा. So James had a continuous fascination about the mystery of life. He kept questioning, exploring, even going to places which were out of bounds. So one such place was a haunted house, the Bell Mansion in the neighborhood. And it had been closed down for almost 50 years. Nobody would go near it because what sari stories were circulating about seeing ghosts over there, like ghosts were attached and they would catch hold of children. Now, this was the house James decided to explore one day, and along with his friend Scott and two more friends, they entered the compound from the backyard, and there they found a boarded window, and through that they entered the house. Now, somehow, when they went inside, James did not feel at all scared, despite all the stories he had heard. He just walked through the house calmly. And in one biggish room, he felt that a lot of partying took place here. He could actually see people waltzing there to the sound of music, sound of a band. And in the next room, he felt that there was a huge dining table laden with food. And in another room, they found a lot of books strewn all over the floor, books and pictures. And mostly the books were on shipping and boating. And there were photographs also among the books. And James was drawn to pick up 2-3 photographs, which were of two boys. And he felt that they were brothers. And then at that moment, when he picked up the boys' pictures, he felt that somebody was standing behind him. And immediately wild thoughts began to run through his mind. Oh, the old lady of the house has come to capture me. But when he turned around, there was no one there. Then suddenly he felt an urge to go to the corner of the room and pick up a photograph lying over there. So it was a photograph of a beautiful lady. And he knew immediately that this must have been the boy's mother. And then amongst the books, he's found another photograph which he was shown as the father, a very dominating sort of person. And James could feel that he was connected to both the sea and to politics also, and that he entertained a lot. Now, he couldn't explain why all these thoughts were coming into his mind, and why he was almost pushed to pick up those particular pictures. But 3 years later, he got confirmation about all that he had thought that day. So he came across the history of the town, and there he got to know that Abraham Bell was the owner of the house, and he was a wealthy shipping merchant, and used to do a lot of entertaining, especially of politicians. And in that article, he also saw the pictures of the whole family, the parents and the children, and they were the same that he had picked up in the house that day. So it was a very clear confirmation of his own inner knowing that he had this ability to know, understand things. Then during his growing years, he had many other mystical experiences. Like once in the cemetery, he used to love to haunt cemeteries, go play over there. So once in the cemetery, he could hear and then actually saw two small children playing. But when he approached, they disappeared. And on the spot, he saw a tombstone showing the names of two small children. So it was obviously those children who were out there and playing, and he could see them. Now, his mother, she forced him to join a seminary to become a priest, but he knew that it was not his calling. But since his mother insisted, he joined it. And during the first year, he again experienced God. And it was not that a figure came and stood next to him, and that is how he experienced God. It was again that deep feeling of peace and tranquility within him. The kind when he had felt when he saw the first vision of the divine, the hand. And in that moment, he also got the realization that God is unlimited, and one only needed to look into our own hearts to find him. So that was his another very divine experience that he had that made him sure about the existence of God and connected him more deeply. And after that, he left the seminary. He knew that I don't need to do this line of study at all. And later, he graduated in broadcasting. Then when he started working, assisting a producer, he once got a chance to visit a medium along with his supervisor. The supervisor's father had passed away and she wanted to know about him, and she took James along with her. And when the clairvoyant told that the father seemed to have injured his finger, she responded that just before he had died, her father had cut his finger. Now, this really shocked James. Like, he wondered, how could this person know about this fact? Then the whole session progressed, and towards the end of the session, the clairvoyant turned to James and said that the spirit people are telling me that you will give readings like this to people in the future, that you can be a very good channel, a medium. And that astonished him even more, because this was something he had never thought about or connected to before. But this session really fascinated him. And after that, he started reading up many books about psychic abilities, mediumship. And through them, he understood that he could follow some techniques to develop his own psychic abilities. And one of those techniques was that he needed to hold an object, close his eyes, and see what feelings came up about the object. And these could be in any form: picture, thoughts, sounds, memes, anything, emotions also. And those things would help him understand about the person. So he found it interesting and he started practicing it. And soon he was making very accurate guesses about his colleagues. So, and in one incident, he had set up a conference room for a meeting and he prepared places for 24 people. But then his co-worker came and said that there were only 22. So James felt a little disappointed that my calculation was not right, my instinct was not right. But when the supervisor entered, she said that they would be 24, as another gentleman and his secretary were also joining the meeting. So such events helped to develop his confidence in his own intuition. And soon his sensitivity also increased dramatically. And he could accurately describe physical characteristics and even emotional states of mind. And people started calling him, asking for his help regarding relationships, his opinion about their partners. And most of the time, he would be accurate. Like one lady asked about her fiance, and he told her that their energies did not match and that she should put off the marriage. But she got angry with him. And but a couple of years later, he got to know that she had got married, but within 5 months they had separated. So again, his instinct had been right about them. Then once while talking to a lady, he asked if she knew anyone by the name of Helen. And the lady replied that it was her grandmother's name, who had died a few months earlier. So James said that she's giving me the thought of a place. He gave the name, and the lady at the other end of the call, she said, oh, that is where she lived. And then James said that she's telling me something about embroidery and a footstool that she was very fond of. Now the lady at the other end, she started crying because it was matching to her grandmother. And this was the first time James had actually got connected to a spirit and conveyed a message. And it was a great shock to him as well. Like, how did I do it? But it opened a new path for him. And one he felt was one with an enormous responsibility, conveying messages from the other side. But it was a very fulfilling thing as well. And but one thing he would find difficulty was coming back to the world of reality. Once he was connected there, he would be in that realm only. And वापस धरती पे आना थोड़ा मुश्किल लगता था फिर उसको. Now, once people got to know about his this ability, तब तो और request आने लग गए because everyone wanted to get in touch with their loved ones who had passed away. And in all, it is all these experiences that he has compiled in a number of books. And Talking to Heaven is one of them, in which he talks about these experiences, about his own life and these experiences. Now, in most of his readings, he feels that the death condition is predominant in the spirit who is trying to make contact. They immediately connect to that last moment, and James could feel that last moment in his own body. That was how deep his connection would be. Like if a person had passed from a heart attack due to a heart attack, he would feel the gripping pain in his chest, very strong feeling of pain in his chest. And if the death occurred like an accident or a murder, sudden death, he would feel a jolt as if something had passed through his body in a very strong way. And sometimes he would feel a lot of heaviness, sharp pain in some part of the body. And sometimes he would even experience their emotions. Like if someone was depressed and crying, he himself would feel that. And it was just not the emotions that he embodied. He could even take on the personality of the spirit who was coming through. Like if it was an authoritative person, his voice would become very commanding, loud. And if it spoke sharply, his voice would change accordingly. Then many spirits who contacted, they would start by giving their name or would describe some event. And then the client could identify with that spirit. Like that, there was one spirit that of someone's deceased husband. And it told her to fill the yellow bird feeder that was hanging on the backyard tree. Now she could immediately identify that it was indeed her husband. So there couldn't be any doubt that some other soul is coming through. So what the author has seen is that at death, though the physical body is lost, the personality remains the same, complete with likes and dislikes, talents, attitudes. They have a choice to progress to a higher level, to change themselves, but it's up to them. Again, it's a choice. Also, he found that they don't give answers to many things that people on earth ask them. Their loved ones, they don't give the complete answers because there are some tests people have to go through. So the spirit cannot give answer. There are spiritual laws, and the spirit, yes, then the spirit cannot like interfere or influence in the karmic progression of another. So spirit people know what is good for the people over here in this world, what is good for their growth. So some things they have to decide and work out for themselves. So they don't give complete answers at time. Like there was one lady and she wanted to know if she could have a baby. So her grandfather came through and he said that you will first change your residence, move to a place above water, and then have a baby boy. But she protested that I'm already in my 40s. So when will I have that baby? So he said everything occurs in God's time. And I cannot tell you when it will happen. You have to go through life without the knowledge. And it was a year and a half later that things moved, and she shifted to a house near the Pacific Ocean and then conceived. So timing sometimes is not told, things are not clearly said. Then there was another lady, Nancy, she was going through a divorce. And when she came for a session, her mother came through and told her that she would marry again to find someone more compatible. So Nancy naturally wanted to know when I will meet him, who will it be? But her mother refused to answer all that. That it will all come to you in good time. I cannot tell you. The girl had to learn how to face the challenging situations and make decisions for herself. So learnings they cannot interfere with. Then James also came in contact with a number of spiritual guides, personal guides who are there to help each of us in our journey. And these spiritual guides, they try to give impressions to our mind as guidance for particular situations. But it is difficult for us to feel the guidance. For we expect that quick guidance there है तो हमें कोई जोर से सर के ऊपर मारेगा and give us directions कि ये करो वो मत करो. But it doesn't work that way. The messages are at a very subtle level. And according to James, that if something is not right for you, the spirit guides put a lot of hindrances in your way. Like you have a meeting for a business proposition, which may not be good for you. So you may get late due to a number of reasons, like you may lose your way, you won't find parking, the lift gets stuck, anything could go wrong. But नहीं आपको तो वो डील पूरी करनी है, so you do that किसी तरह से भी by hook or crook you do it, and then things will not work out, and a few months later you realize that this deal was not right for me. But of course जब वो events हो रही थी, we don't pay attention to the signs that are being given to us. So we need to look at the subtle signs that are happening around us. हमें क्या समझ आ रही है? What is the universe trying to tell us? That someone is trying to tell us something. But most of us जो है हम अपनी मस्ती में ही जीते रहते हैं. We don't understand the signs at all. The spirit guides help us in a positive way also. They say you're looking for a job and out of the blue you get connected to a old school friend. And when you meet him, he's able to guide you to an opening for a job. Now, it is again up to you that you go to meet that friend or not, whether you take the tip he's giving you or not, to accept the guidance. It is again free choice. But still, you are being guided. And when you follow, you get the job. So both ways they help us. They try to stop us also, and then they push us also. And in fact, this is one thing James has understood. If everything is going right and there seem to be no hindrances in your life, you are open to spirit and are following their guidance. And if nothing is working out in your life, then you're not listening to your guides and you're choosing the wrong paths. And you know, these guides can be anyone. They could be a grandfather or uncle or parent who has passed away into the spirit world. And when they pass away, they don't stop thinking about us. They're always connected to us. In fact, it's like they have been given an opportunity to guide us in a better way from the other side. So, उनकी guidance और valuable हो जाती है. One session he had was with a lady, Mary, James, and she came to visit him. And when she sat in front of him, James felt a physical presence beside her. And he asked her if you know the name Roger. And she immediately said that yes, that was her husband's name. And then James said he's showing me the cockpit of a plane and all the dials have stopped functioning and there's smoke and fire. So Mary started crying that he had died in an air crash just a year ago. Now James had no idea about her husband or what had happened to him. And now he started telling her that her husband was very happy to see her here. And he was telling her that he loved her and he was wishing her a happy anniversary also. She was totally flabbergasted, and she said that their anniversary had just been the previous week. Then James said that there's a small boy also standing next to him, Tommy. And she started crying even harder, that it was their son, and both father and son had been on a joyride when the plane had crashed. And then Tommy started talking. He said, "Don't be scared, Ma. I'm with my uh, father, I'm with daddy, and I'm very happy." And then he said, "Say hello to Bobby and tell him I'm not angry with him for wearing my red shirt." Bobby was his brother, and that day only he had worn his brother's shirt. So after the session, Mary was feeling much better, lighter, saying that just knowing that they were together and they were fine was making her feel better. She had, of course, been devastated when the incident had happened, but now this contact had rejuvenated her. And this is how the sessions used to help people, whoever came to him for help. Then in another session, a couple who had lost their son came, and the son had passed away in very controversial circumstances. Now, the couple did not have much belief in such things, in such sessions. They were very skeptical about it, but just thought, कि चलो try करने में क्या हर्ज है, that sort of attitude they came. And the first person to come through in the session was the lady, Sandra's mother. And James told that she's telling you to be careful with the knife. Sandra was shocked because that day only she had cut her finger in the kitchen while sharpening the knife. And her response was she in my kitchen? James laughed. He said, I wasn't in your kitchen, so she must have seen you. That's why she's saying that. Then James felt another spirit and asked if they knew Stephen. And then they both started crying because Stephen was their son. And James told him that he's very agitated, and he's been trying to contact you. And he's saying that he has to right a wrong. Then James said that I feel as if my head is burning and it is being blown to bits. Was he shot with a gun? He asked them. And they acknowledged that. And then James said that your son was involved in drugs. Did you know that? Sandra said that yes, we found it out after he passed away. Then James said that he's very agitated and he's shouting her name, Ronnie, continuously. And they said yes, that he was a friend of his. And then James said he's talking about a gold watch. The parents said yes, we couldn't find him. It was his last birthday gift, and we couldn't find him after he died. We looked everywhere. Then James said that Stephen is saying that he gave it to Ronnie for payment, and that they had some kind of fight. And then Stephen started shouting, I didn't kill myself. It was Ronnie who killed me. Now, this was a great shock to the parents because, and to James as well, because very rarely does a spirit name its murderer, come through with such an event. But here, the spirit wanted justice, especially as the parents were thinking that he had committed suicide. And they said that that is what we thought. We never thought of murder at all. But now this was a new bit of knowledge that had come to them. Stephen also told that he was in a fight with Ronnie, and he had taken his father's pistol to threaten him. Stephen owed Ronnie money and had given him his gold watch. But Ronnie was adamant that he wanted money only, and he had snatched the gun from Stephen's hand and he shot Stephen there only. Now, Stephen wanted justice. Then he also showed an image of a red garage, to which didn't make sense to the parents because they didn't have a garage. Then he just spoke about his funeral and then he said goodbye. And then the grandmother stepped in again and she said that you have made Stephen feel better. He was very agitated till now. So that was the end of the session. And a couple of months later, James got a call from Sandra, and following up the information that they got in touch with the police and they asked them to investigate Ronnie. And when the police did so, they found that he was dealing in drugs. And they even found a stock of heroin in the same garage whose image had come through in the session, the same red color brick garage that he described. And they also found Stephen's gold watch over there. And then in custody, when they questioned Ronnie, he confessed to having killed Stephen. He had gone to Stephen's house to collect the money. And Stephen had given him the gold watch, but he still wanted the money. And then they had got angry, and he just snatched the gun and shot him. So that the whole case got resolved due to the connection with the spirit. Where the parents were thinking it was a matter of suicide, it turned out to be murder. So there are innumerable more stories which showed how the spirits were eager to communicate with their loved ones, to resolve issues, to help them cope with their loss in a better way. No one just vanishes. They're all willing to connect. So we have to tune ourselves to the extent that we can be receptive to their efforts to connect us. So that is all I have for today. So we can look at more stories further on. Thank you so much.